Hi, this is John Redmann. Thank you for joining us on this special webcast segment of John Redmann, Power of Attorney. Our special guest is Robert David, preeminent attorney in medical negligence cases, someone I'm proud to have worked with on lots of cases. So let's get right to it. Robert, we've talked about medical review panels. That's when somebody wants to bring a medical negligence or a medical malpractice case. In Louisiana, they have to bring their claim to what's called the medical review panel first. The medical review panel is composed of 3 doctors, one selected by the injured party or the survivors if the injured party died, somebody selected by the defendant doctor or hospital, and then somebody selected by those first 2. What has been your experience with what kind of outcomes you can expect with those panels? What are they there for, and what kind of outcomes do you expect with those panels?
Well, the statistics pretty much tell you what outcome to expect. And they vary from year to year, but very, very little variance. I think it's about 6–7% are won by patients, and 90+% are won by the healthcare provider.
All right. So if the lawyer who decides after meeting the patient or the patient's family, if the patient didn't make it, decides that he or she wants to pursue the claim, that's after the lawyer has already had, or probably has already had, a medical doctor evaluate the medical documentation, medical records, determines to go forward. That lawyer files a request to go to medical review panel, correct?
Correct.
Then the lawyer goes to the medical review panel, files almost like a petition, but it's a detailed summary of what medical negligence on behalf of the family the lawyer believes took place, correct?
That's correct.
And details it, and the other side gets to prepare a position paper arguing why they believe that there was no medical negligence, even if there was a unfortunate outcome. Fair statement?
Fair enough.
Okay. And if I heard your answer a minute ago correctly, the statistics in Louisiana with these medical review panels say that more than 9 times out of 10, these doctors, who are all Louisiana doctors or Louisiana medical experts, typically doctors, more than 9 times out of 10, they're going to say they're not going to find medical negligence occurred. Fair statement?
That is unfortunately correct.
Okay. What conclusions do you draw from such statistics?
Well, it's rather difficult for Louisiana doctors to testify against Louisiana doctors. And if you're on a panel and you find that there was negligence on the part of one of your cohorts, and in, let's say, the specialty of orthopedics, when there are only a fixed number of orthopedists in the state and they all go to the same meetings and conventions and social gatherings, then that person just might be criticized.
So it's sort of an understanding that many lawyers who represent injured plaintiffs, claimants, that local doctors are to testify against other doctors and say, I'm sorry, this other doctor, he screwed up. And if they get on a panel and say, that other doctor, I'm afraid he breached the standard of care, that means he committed malpractice, those are a very rare breed.
Somewhat, but you know, I don't want to paint everybody with that same brush, because there are many honorable doctors who will serve on these panels and do the right thing. And some of them, after the panel is over, if they are presented with additional facts, may change their mind, one way or the other.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, after the medical review panel renders a decision, does the injured party win or lose at that point of the stage? Do they get paid? I know the answer, but for the benefit of our viewers, tell us.
No, that's often just the beginning. I mean, you've gotten through step 1, you've crossed the first hurdle, and you now go to court. And if you win the panel, there is a good chance that the case might get resolved by settlement, but not always.
If your evidence is that strong, then
that's right.
Likely they'll want to settle with you. But if you don't win at the panel stage, but you and your medical experts believe your case is strong enough, then you can choose to go forward with an actual lawsuit in the courthouse.
Correct. I take the medical review panel, I bring it back to the expert who told me that you had a case if I lost, and say, now, here it is. Tell me why the panel is wrong. And if that doctor can't convince me that they're wrong, then I'm not going to pursue the claim.
Okay. Okay. Typically, and again, nuts and bolts for our viewers, does the injured person, the person who believes there was a malpractice issue, do they have to pay lawyers such as you or others who practice in this field out of their pocket for this assistance up until this point?
No. It's unreasonable to expect a patient, especially a patient who's been seriously injured, probably can't work, or if it's a spouse, even the non-working spouse has to do whatever is necessary to support the non-working spouse with medical treatment and pay for that. No one has enough money. But the insurance companies, of course, have.
Right. So it's kind of like a car accident case. If you are able to actually get past all those hurdles, and if there's indeed medical negligence, if you're able to get to the point where you're in trial or you're getting to trial and the case either settles or you're victorious, only at that point is that when the lawyer representing the claimant is paid?
That's correct. All our cases are on a contingency fee basis. We get paid if we are successful, and we don't get paid if we're not.
Same like my office. You only collect if the client has won the case and is due to collect.
Or settles the case, correct.
Okay. Now, let's change gears for a minute. Medical negligence, let's give an example for people. If someone has entered the emergency room with a problem and the doctor commits it, what's a typical example in your experience of negligence that happens when somebody goes to the emergency room thinking one thing and the doctor commits an error?
I guess the most common one is a patient who goes in the hospital with symptoms that might be related to a heart problem, a heart attack, and the patient is given a GI cocktail and said it's indigestion and sent home. There's a saying that is popular among doctors: there are more people in cemeteries that died of indigestion than any other condition.
And the joke and why that's funny, ha-ha, is because the indigestion was not indigestion. It was
a heart attack.
It was a heart attack.
The beginning of a heart attack that could have been stopped in its tracks.
Right. And that brings up the word that we use a lot when we're in trial or when we're in settlement negotiations or in debate with the other side: differential diagnosis. Why don't you tell us how that plays into that scenario?
Well, the first thing the doctor is going to say is, what is wrong with this patient? And he or she comes up with one or two or three things. Indigestion, could be myocardial infarction. So what am I going to do with these differential diagnoses? I'm going to rule them out. You start by ruling out the most serious and life-threatening one first. You do everything you can to rule out a heart attack.
That's standard operating procedure for doctors, not only in the emergency room, but anytime a patient has a condition that becomes emergent or becomes potentially a serious threat.
Absolutely, because you're not going to die of indigestion.
Right.
But if you are having a heart attack, as unlikely as it may seem, that's what you've got to take care of.
So to sum up, patient goes into the doctor, they ask the patient, what are you here for? Well, I have this terrible, it feels like indigestion, I took some Alka-Seltz or whatever. The doctor says, it could be indigestion, it's probably indigestion, you know, it's probably all it is, but the doctor also knows it could be a heart attack, and it could be maybe one or two other things. The doctor's obligation, and it's not something you can deviate from, is rule out the most life-threatening, the worst possible outcomes. Because the differential diagnosis could be this diagnosis, could be a different diagnosis. Rule out the worst ones and do your EKG, do your testing, and if the testing says it's not a heart attack, move on to the less threatening. And finally, if it's just indigestion, at that point, give them an antacid or whatever and tell them to go home. Correct?
Pretty much right.
Okay. We're all out of time. We're very grateful to you, and I found this completely interesting, but I'm hoping that our viewers will go to our website, jrpoa.com, for more information, statistics, links to statistics on medical malpractice, and join us for next week's episode.